Dobro večer ljudi, znači evo 64. MobileMonday. Ovo je malo drugačiji zbog toga što imamo gosta Joea iz New Yorka, iz BeerMenus ekipe. Mi neko vrijeme radimo sa njima, malo pomažemo oko Android aplikacije. Joe je slučajno u Splitu i odlučio je ovaj MobileMonday održati nekakvu mobilnom predavanju, nekakvoj cross-platform tehnologiji koju oni koriste u razvoju svog softvera i ispričat će kako je to njima pomoglo, šta je uštedilo i zašto je to pametan izbor u njihovom slučaju bio. Inače, znači, BeerMenus je biti nekakav katalog piva i to. Tako da, u biti smo donali puno raznih vrsta piva, ljudi poslužite se pivom, downloadajte aplikaciju, ocijenite pivo, nađite pivo u aplikaciji koje ima ovdje i to je to. Tako da stvarno uzmite pivo, jel? Molim vas. Sad je gospodin ću ja doneti, kolega Vladan, šta će?
Sad, ja nemam pravo izgovora.
Ne, vi zaberite, ali ja ću vam doneti.
Otiš mi da biti.
Da.
Mi smo mlađi pa ćemo mi mlađi.
Vi možete, da, naravno. Ja se moram maknuti.
Hvala lijepa, još sad na noge.
Okay, guys, so we will start now. So this is your. I was asking them to actually
take some beers.
Yeah. And to download the applications.
Awesome.
They can actually read it. Imamo upaljač. Eto!
Sve?
Okay, so Joe, here is stage yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to present today. As Nicholas said, I'm from New York. I'm here in Split for a couple weeks. Unfortunately, Friday, but spent 6 or so weeks here, digital nomading. But I'm here to talk about my company, BeerMenus, and how we scale to 600,000 monthly active users with just a team of 7 full-time employees, and how we support that across our multitude of platforms. So, the agenda, I'm going to walk you through a quick introduction of who I am. I'm going to talk about what BeerMenus is. I'm going to dive into what the magic is, the secret sauce. Turbolinks is what we call it. That's what it's called. We might do a live demo, depending on some technical, some confusion over here with the Mac and the Windows machine, but we might just huddle around, so we'll see. And then I'll open up the floor to some Q&A. So, outside of that, I would love if anyone has any questions, please just raise their hand or dive right in with a question at any time. Let's make this interactive. I'm curious to hear what you all think about it, and if you have any questions about, how it's used or just how you can use it in your apps. So, yeah, I'm going to walk through it all. The big thing here is that we're a small team and we manage a huge app across many platforms, and I'm going to tell you essentially our secret and how we do it. So, who am I? Again, my name is Joe. I'm the lead developer at BeerMenus. Before BeerMenus, I worked at a company called Pivotal Labs. It's a test-driven development focused consultancy. We helped people build products, get bootstrap companies, did a lot of testing and a lot of writing Ruby and a lot of writing Swift and Objective-C actually back then. I also maintain a blog on Maslowity.com. It's on development, on testing, if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, please check it out, but it's mostly centered around iOS development right now. I have 6 published apps in the App Store. 3 of them are on beer, 2 of them are on food, and 1 of them is on games and stuff, so kind of all over the place there, but I like to maintain, you know, what I do in my free time with my hobbies and stuff. Outside of that, I love board games and I love Star Wars. I'm playing this Star Wars game right now it's kind of like Magic, but with dice. It's really fun. It's called Destiny. Definitely recommend checking it out if you have time. And like I said, I'm a digital nomad. My girlfriend and I are traveling around Europe right now for 6 months, working, giving presentations, you know, teaching people stuff, but also just living and being a full-time employee. So, what is BeerMenus? I've mentioned it a few times. Our motto is to help people find great beer. Craft beer in the US and blowing up all over the place now is a huge market. People are always looking for the latest and greatest stuff. They're always looking for where to find it. And our platform connects craft beer drinkers with people that are selling craft beer. So think of it as a repository of beers and where you can find them. We, 2 big things are you're looking for a beer, you search on the app, you find out where to buy it, or you say what's on tap at this restaurant before you go and see if they have anything good. All of that functionality is available on our desktop website, our mobile website, our native Android app, and our native iOS app. And feature parity, probably at 90%-ish of the functionality exists across all 4. And we're always working on getting that to 100, but we're very close with it. And a lot of it has to do, of course, with Turbolinks. So that's a little bit about what BeerMenus is, right? This is what it looks like. I apologize for the potentially bad quality, but this is just showing a beer page. So this is, you can see in the middle there, Bell's Two Hearted Ale. It's a really good beer you can get in the US, especially in the Northeast. It's a really hoppy IPA. It shows where you can find it on desktop, our native Android app, and our native iOS app over on the right. You'll notice that these look pretty similar, and we'll get into how that's actually rendered with HTML in a hybrid app approach later on when we dive into Turbolinks. So, outside of what BeerMenus is, what do I do? Like I said, I'm the lead developer. There is only one other full-time developer in the company, and that's the CEO. So there's a lot of work that gets pushed onto me in terms of managing the server, which is built on Ruby on Rails, building out the iOS and Android apps, getting a lot of help from the consultants that are, Antonio and Nicola helped us out a lot with the Android apps, building out our testing infrastructure, anything architecture-wise, performance, it all falls down onto me to make sure that we're using the latest and greatest and aware of like what we can do to make our app faster and more responsive and just better. Outside of the tech stack, I also manage what we call the consumer product, which is kind of like how you and me would use the app, finding the beers, grading the beers, logging the beers, and stuff like that. We'll talk a little bit more about how there's 2 sides to it. There's us, and then there's the business owners that actually update their menus. So, as you can see, I take care of a lot, and our company, everyone has a list like this. Our head of sales does everything like this. Our CEO's list is crazy, but we're small, but we still manage a bunch of platforms, right? And how we do that is with our businesses, our bar owners, updating the menu for us. So every bar owner has what we call the retailer product, has their page, their bar, their restaurant, their bottle shop, and they manage it themselves. So we know the data is up to date all the time, because they're updating it every day, sometimes every week. When a keg's kicked sometime, they'll update it every hour during a big event on a Friday, which is really awesome to see. But I'm going to walk you through all of the features that the retailer product, a business owner, uses on a day-to-day basis throughout their relationship with BeerMenus. So this is the most basic. It's kind of like the level 1 of BeerMenus we use in our onboarding. This is how a business owner will update their menu. So showing again, it's on desktop and mobile. what they do is they type in a beer in that big box in the top middle, and they'll autocomplete for something, so they'll start typing in something, and they'll get a list of suggestions so we can keep our database nice and clean. If they add something new, it adds to our database right there, and we can just continue to update it. But there's a lot of also kind of hidden functionality here that is maybe a little bit hard to see, but you can imagine someone's beer menu, right? You want to break it out into sections, maybe bottles on tap, what's on in cans or something that are really big now. So you can have them sort manually like that, automatically. Or you can add your own custom menu section. So you can break down your beers into hoppy beers, or malty, or sweet, or sour. And all that is done through this single screen on all the platforms, giving the bar owner, the manager, total flexibility in how they want their menu to display on our platform. So now that they have their beers in the system on our website, how do they actually tell people about it? How do they advertise it? The next big thing that we do is called embedded beer menus. Here you can see Whole Foods Tribeca, which is a huge grocery store in downtown Manhattan. Their website with our beer menu embedded inside of it. So this is pretty cool. It's just an iframe. I didn't know anyone used that anymore when I came on, but it's an iframe that loads via a simple JavaScript function and is just their menu up to date, live at all times. So they update in one spot. Their website is updated without them having to do anything else. Makes it really easy for them. They update 300 beers every month, something crazy like that, because their turnover is so high. Kind of next level is their Facebook page. We can do the same embedding into a custom tab on Facebook. You set it up once, you authenticate with Facebook, and you are set for the rest of your business with beer menus. Everything you update on your menu will update all across your platforms. This is really nice because you don't have to worry about, again, updating all three things every time you add a beer. We connect to Facebook. Of course, you can auto-post to Facebook, auto-post to Twitter, simple things like that, but less value than just showing something that's live and active at all times. One more cool thing about this, like I said, it's an iframe. It's just HTML, it's just CSS at the end of the day. They have full customization. They can do whatever they want to it to make it look like, blend into their website with their orange and green colors, or use just the default theme, which is our blue and orange, you can see there. So it really embeds into the website, and you can tell, I can't really tell that it's ours, which is really nice for them because it just shows that it's their data. So that's how we get people into the store. That's how we bars advertise stuff, their beers. What about when you're there? What about when you're actually sitting down at a bar, or you're here and you wanted to see what's available, right? We also offer something called print menus. And this is exactly what it sounds like. We can take that same exact menu, you hit one button, and boom, you have it on a piece of paper. Sounds pretty straightforward, and like, why is this even a thing? You've probably never had to manage 30, 40 items on a Word doc and make sure they fit on one page, or they don't scroll over to a second page. It is always what people ask for the most customization with, and think that saves the most time for them, because they're not worrying about having to move things around or change colors or change fonts and stuff like that. You tell us how many pages you want, you tell us how many beers you have, and we just give you it. That's it. We scale it automatically. We have an algorithm that moves like the last 2 beers from the first page to the second. It works really, really well. And again, it's fully customizable because that's actually just HTML that's then rendered through Wicked PDF, right into a PDF. So any customizations that you put on your website will just move right over to your print menu. All of your beer menu propaganda, all of your beer menu, merchandise all looks exactly the same and is branded to your company. So print menus are a little annoying sometimes because once you print them out, they are almost immediately out of date. A lot of people will stamp it to change the beer or print it out every single day, but sometimes you want something a little more current, a little more active if you're turning over more often. And for that, we offer digital displays. Imagine this projector with a huge beer menu on it. That's pretty much all they are. The same exact things apply, full customization, updating live all the time. This is really awesome for those sports bars that aren't showing a game at the time. They can just show their menu right there, and it's live. We're actually working on something with this today, where we're adding WebSockets to this to make it actually update without having to refresh, which will be really cool. We just tell bartenders to just, refresh once and you're good to go. We also use these to promote specials, happy hours, stuff like that, sponsorships, anything customizable content. Again, it's just HTML, it's just CSS, nothing fancy. So that kind of takes you through the retailer product. It talks about all the different ways that the business owner can interact with their app. They're doing all of these things on all of our different platforms, right? So now you kind of want to get a sense of how big is BeerMenus. We talked about 600,000 users, right? We were founded in 2008. We were two people, two brothers. They built the app and the website from scratch over the course of a couple of years, and then I joined a couple of years ago. But as of right now, we are 30,000 bars, restaurants, and places are in our system. I think 95% of that is in the US right now, but we're expanding pretty quickly. We have over 200,000 beers in our system. So even though that sounds like a ridiculous amount, that's actually a small portion of how many beers exist in the world, because every day, like 30 or 40 or something are being created. All the craft beers coming out of like Brooklyn and the West Coast and stuff. But we have a pretty good representation of what people actually are drinking and what the new stuff is. And then, again, as I mentioned, 600,000 monthly active users on all 4 platforms. We sometimes like to cheat in a 5th platform and say that the TV is another one, but we'll just say 4 for here because it makes a lot more sense because that's the platforms that we're developing for. So that sums up what BeerMenus is, the non-technical part. I'm going to dive into how we glue this all together, how we actually make it all work with Turbolinks next. Before I move on, I'd love to open up if there are any questions about BeerMenus or what I do there. Yeah.
Is this paid functionality?
The whole,
like from the bar owner?
Yeah, we offer 5 different tiers. One is free. And the free plan gives you the update menu, and it shows up on all our website and apps and stuff. And then the more promotion you want to do, the more we'll tack on per month.
Do you have some kind of statistics? What platforms does your bar owners use? Like, how many of them are actually using the TV?
That's a good question. Probably like 10%.
That's a lot.
It's a fair amount. 10% I'd say of like our paying customers use that. I don't know for sure about the number of everyone, but our platform that's being used that's adding the beers the most is by far iPhone on mobile web. So not our native apps that we spend all this time on, but regular old HTML website, mobile web on an iPhone is where people are updating their beers the most often.
Do you have like plans to add them to like Alexa or something like that? Can I ask BeerMenus where is like
That'd be really cool. Yeah, no plans yet, but maybe I'll write that down for next week.
Do you guys have any breweries as your customers?
We do. We have breweries in 2 different kind of aspects. We have breweries that have a tap room, and they, are like a normal bar to us, right? Mm-hmm. They have their menu, they have their list. We also have registered breweries, which they take control of their beer page, and they get to manage all the data about their beers themselves. So instead of like if I was a bar owner, I could add this beer and spell it wrong by accident. If it's for a registered brewery, they won't let them do that because they will kind of lock down the beers. And it's really good for us because it ensures data integrity. But it gets a little annoying sometimes for the bar owners where they just want to get something in really quickly.
But do you guys employ some kind of like franchise model with the breweries, or just the same way as you deal with any bars like clients?
Yeah.
Because maybe you should probably think about the franchising concept, because breweries, they have their own like list of clients that they can sell your software to, so you can cash on the royalties or something.
No, totally. Yeah, we're in touch with Grimm Brewery. It's a brewery in Brooklyn, and through them we've actually met a lot of clients through like word of mouth and stuff because they're just super popular. But yeah, franchising would be excellent. Cool. So moving on to Turbolinks. So what the hell is it? I said it like 100 times already. It's supposed to be what I'm talking about today, and let's actually get down to it. Turbolinks was developed by a company called Basecamp. Is anyone familiar with Basecamp? They're a project management tool. DHH, the creator of Ruby on Rails, is one of their, not CEO, I don't think, but or high up there. But Turbolinks is a tiny JavaScript framework. It is 36 kilobytes. It has no dependencies, and all it does is very simple. When you click a link, it hijacks that link, it makes the request via XHR JavaScript, and it gets the response and shoves it in the body of the HTML. That's all it does. Why is that so good? Every time you click a link on a normal website, it has to load the entire head, load the entire body, and then render it all, and then display it to the user. Think about the last website you worked on. How many script tags or CSS tags or includes are in your head? You're incurring that cost every single time you click on a new page. Yes, we can defer them with async, or we can push them off with defer, but you still have to load them every single time. Turbolinks gets around all of that by just loading what's in your body, what the user sees, and just reusing all your scripts in the head. So your page load times will dramatically increase just by dropping this into your web app. You don't even have to forget all the hybrid and Turbolinks, mobile stuff. Your app will just be faster once it's configured correctly, which is a really great improvement. Yeah?
But the initial load time is slower because you need to have all CSS and JavaScript for the entire application.
So it does do something a little bit smarter where it looks at the head for the initial page load and loads it in like normal. Like Turbolinks doesn't come into play until you click your first link, okay? When you click your first link, it looks at the diff of the new head tag with the old one and will merge it in. So if there is a new style that's loaded on like page 2, it will tell the browser, hey, you actually need to load this one as well. So your initial page load time won't be affected at all, and except the 36 kilobytes.
Yeah.
Link clicks are intercepted, performed XHR, like I said. It works on all modern browsers. I think even IE it works with, but
IA?
yeah, because it only uses like window.document and builds up a page stack so you can go forward and backwards. That's all the API it uses. But on the rare occasion that you're using like an old BlackBerry phone that has its own text link browser or something, it won't be enabled. It'll just step aside and not do anything, and you won't see any difference because all it is performance. You won't see any functionality differences. One more thing about that that's interesting is once you add the JavaScript framework, the Turbolinks framework, you add a different JavaScript hook. You don't use $, you just use Turbolinks on load, or Turbolinks load as the hook. That's pretty much it. You don't have to decorate any of your link tags. You don't have to say, okay, you load this one with Turbolinks and do all this fancy stuff. It just works. It intercepts those clicks for you, and it will do everything else, which is really nice. So that's how it works on the web, and it's great on the web. But really, its benefit comes from how it interacts with native applications, and it uses something called adapters to deal with that. So native apps are built with these two respective adapters, Turbolinks iOS and Turbolinks Android. One for iOS, one for Android. What happens here is the adapter sits in between your native code, your Swift, your Java, your Objective-C, and your JavaScript in your browser, and it communicates between the two to tell each other when to load a page, when to go back, when to change content, all that good stuff that's normally done by a heavy routing library or a lot of code in your native app. This does a lot of the legwork for you in conjunction with Turbolinks on the browser. So the adapter can respond to this. It can push new screens. It can have custom routing logic if you want to say, let's say, don't use a web view for this next page, show the contact picker, show something native. All that can be handled right in the router. And I'm going to just show here actually how it works through a full request cycle, so you can see how little code you actually have to write to get this working. For those in the back that can't see this is a web view in JavaScript up top, the adapter, and then native code. The only thing that you're writing is this native code bar right there. So you'll see how little shows up in there. So the top of the request, what happens? Someone clicks a link, right? Boom, I click a link. That is hijacked by JavaScript with Turbolinks. It fires that then off to the adapter via a page load method. The adapter says, okay, great, a page is about to be loaded. I need to figure out what to do. It asks your native app, hey, someone just clicked this URL. What do you want to do with it? Right? Do you want to handle it natively? Or do you want to just let me take care of it and go on the rendering cycle? Let's say we don't want to handle it natively. We just want to let it happen. We pass it back to the adapter, and the adapter takes a screenshot of that web view. Okay? Hold off on a second there while I just finish out native. If we did want to render it natively, we present a native screen. We're kind of done with the whole Turbolinks thing. We're in native world now, so that's kind of the end of that. But back into screenshotting the web view. So now we have a page that's about to be loaded, a web view that's been screenshotted. We then go back to normal Turbolinks world. We load our request via execchar just like normal. That page finishes loading. We tell the adapter, hey, I'm done. You should push a new screen right now. Okay? And then once the screen is pushed, we render that content. So what's happening there is we have a screen. I'm going to use iOS so we can push things on top of each other. We have a screen. I click a link. This is screenshotted. A new screen slides on top of it with the actual web view. And once it's actually in place, this then loads and renders the content via JavaScript. So you don't actually see this web view slide out and go on top because it's the same web view. It's a screenshot, so you actually, it looks like you're seeing two different screens, which is really nice. If we can get a demo working later, I'll show you how it works, or I can just pass around my phone or look at the iOS app or Android app for BeerMenus because the whole thing is built with it. So we talked about presenting that native screen. Of course, once you present the native screen, it's up to you. You have to render your own content. So taking this out of the picture, not doing anything natively, you're just saying no. That's all you're doing in your app once you add it, is you're saying no and you have this full-blown kind of hybrid approach with Turbolinks built into your website without really much work. Any questions on this before I move on? So this here is an example of the Basecamp app on iOS. And you can see here, the content itself doesn't totally matter. Don't worry about trying to read it. But things that are purple are web, are HTML. And things that aren't are native. So you can see here, this is kind of like a home screen, right? They built the whole thing fully native. They went all out. They built it. Then they had this whole like messaging type iMessage, messenger app. And they let the web view render all the content. All they have down here is a native send button and an input box. Over here, the same thing, but they have a native photo picker, right? This is really cool because we can start to layer on these extra features of native code without having to take the screen and make it fully native. So we're still relying heavily on that second screen on the browser and the JavaScript to render our text thread, our message thread. And all we're doing is saying, a keyboard would be really nice if it was a native keyboard, or a native input, so let's do that natively. We use this on BeerMenus. When you log a beer, that screen is fully native. When you search for something, that's fully native. We want it to be super responsive and use Algolia as native APIs. But then when you actually start rendering content, it's actually just that web view that I showed you earlier, which makes it really easy to build things out very, very quickly. Sorry. Like I said, you can take that and make it native, web, however you want. This is a quote from the people at Basecamp. Native or web isn't a binary choice, but instead a spectrum, right? So you might build your app at first, and you start off all the way over here on the website, and you're like, all we have is this native tab bar, and this, or at the top or the bottom, and we have native pushing of controllers, and everything else is a web view. That's great. You can ship it, ship it, get feedback on it, and then start building out your native app, your native functionality, to bring that slider over as you build out more and more functionality to be native and to be fully, just more higher fidelity. better functionality for things that are more complex, maps, pickers, sliders, choosers, things that are notoriously annoying to use on the web on mobile. If I had to guess, BeerMenus is probably right around here. We rely very heavily on the web because we iterate a lot on all of our screens, but we do have a couple that are fully native, like I mentioned, that we've honed in on and we've done so many times that we know that's exactly what we want right now. But all of our A/B testing still sits on our browser because it's very easy to iterate there and make changes and just ship it out and everyone gets the same change. But we're slowly pushing further and further and further. So that was how Turbolinks works on a high level. Now I'm actually going to show some code and get into how you can wire up an iOS app to work with Turbolinks. The first thing I'll do is really just show us where you build that hook, right? How do you say, where do I get the information from? And then we'll dive into showing a native pop-up and some other stuff.
Sorry, can I ask
Yeah.
one more question? Does the web page need any information that it's used by Turbolinks? So does the web need any more configuration than normally when you build a web page if you use it on Android or something?
Nope. So you build a website, you add Turbolinks to it, you ship it to the, I don't know, where do you ship websites? You publish it, right? And then you
add Turbolinks to the web, not to Android.
Yeah. So, well, let me see if I can rephrase it just so I understand. I build this website, I deploy it, and I want to add iOS functionality. I only have to write iOS Turbolinks code. I don't have to actually change the website at all.
Yeah.
Which is really great when we shipped out our Android app a couple months after our iOS app. We didn't actually have to change our website at all. We just hooked in the Turbolinks adapter for Android into our website and everything worked beautifully. So the main entrance point into a Turbolinks application is something called the session on iOS. The session is the central coordinator. It is the person in charge of everything. It probably will be your God object by the end of your life cycle. It will have thousands of lines of code. Not great, of course, but this is where everything it starts. So it's very easy to get long and convoluted. The purpose of this is that it manages your web view. Singular, remember, only one web view going around your entire app, no matter what. It's in charge of screenshotting, of moving that around, of showing the new pages, of asking your application, what do I do with this URL? That's how you interact with it. It will be assigned a delegate. You can see over there the session delegate. Your application responds to those two methods, which I'll get into next, and says, when I get this URL, do this. When I get that URL, do that. And when I have errors, do this. This is the protocol for the session delegate. It's really only two things. Up here we have did propose, I think I can actually get a curse. Did propose visit. I have a URL. It says someone clicked the link. That's it. Here's the URL of the link that someone clicked. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to say no and I'll handle it? Or do you want to present your native screen? And then the boring one, did fail. Here's an error. Up to you. Print it out, throw it away, log it to something, show an alert. But that's pretty much it. That's all that the application entry point is into your application from the adapter. Which means that it makes it very easy to route every single page differently or based on custom logic. You don't have to worry about the classic problem of iOS and Android development. When I click this button on this page, I have to show this controller. But on this button on this page, I have to show that controller. One entrance point gets a URL, and then you route it to however you want to do it. Which makes it very powerful and easy to show hundreds of different types of controllers and different activities, all from one way with a simple either regex router or just a simple switch statement. So I mentioned the say no, return false, right? It's not as easy as that. You actually do still have to build something, but it's only 4 lines of code. Turbolinks provides this visitable view controller. I believe it's visitable activity or something similar on Android. And I'll get into how that works right here. It's a view controller, simple, it conforms to a protocol, but what matters for you is that it displays that web view. It displays the WK web view full screen, and all you have to do is say, here's a URL, go visit it, and push that screen onto your controller stack, or push it up onto your activity stack, and you're good. So that's the return false that I was talking about, those couple lines of code. It's a view controller, it's a normal one, so if you want to do anything custom, remember we saw Basecamp had the text message thread and then the input bar at the bottom? Well, you can just subclass it, remove the web view from the view hierarchy, add in that toolbar, and then add the web view back in, and now you have a half-native screen for a custom controller that you routed on the previous page. So right there you now have a hybrid view controller almost that's doing most of your heavy lifting on the browser and all of your input natively. So I showed you the two big components of this, the session and its delegate, and the visitable view controller. Now I'm going to show you in 2 steps, about 15-ish lines of code, how you would actually write that code instead of just throwing up pseudocode because it's easy. So, this is probably extremely difficult to see, I apologize. I have an application controller which inherits from a navigation controller. For those not familiar with iOS, it's just a stack of controllers on top of each other. You push things on top of it, and it creates a stack. We create a reference to a session. On initialization, we configure our web view. We create our session with the web view. We call super. We assign the delegate to ourselves. We assign the sessions delegate to ourselves. Remember, I talked about the session delegate. This is where kind of the magic happens. It's wiring us up to the session. And that is our application controller. That's all it needs to do. It inherits from you a navigation controller, so we get a lot of that for free in terms of presentation. Your iOS class would just present this navigation controller as the root, and you would be good to go in terms of getting it on the screen. And again, pointed out one more time, but we assigned ourselves as the delegate. So let's wire that up. We'll extend application controller to conform to the session delegate. There's that first method that we talked about, the one that says I clicked a link and need to go to this URL. And here's those 4 lines of code that I was talking about. I'm going to create a visitable view controller, pass in that URL that was given down to me. I'm going to push that visitable view controller onto our navigation stack. So now it's being added onto the screen. And I'm going to tell the session to visit it. So if we didn't call this, the session doesn't know what to do with that URL that just passed you. It's saying, someone clicked this URL, what do you want to do with it? If you don't tell it to do anything, well, it won't do anything. So this is just saying, it's okay, go visit it, I'll handle the rest. And then we're just going to print an error, because that's just easy enough for right now. So right there, with only, I think I said 15 lines of code, maybe less, but that's your entire scaffolding for a Turbolinks application, outside of integrating the pod, the CocoaPod. Really not that bad. And when you want to make a screen that's native, all you do is have an if statement, a switch statement, or a regex parser right there, and you say, when I hit /sign in, do this. When I hit /log out, do that. Present a native controller. Present an action sheet from the bottom. That's it. Any questions on these two? So I'm going to introduce one more concept of Turbolinks that I'm going to spell out like this, that I think is really important. And it's called the JavaScript bridge. At least I call it the JavaScript bridge. I don't know if it has a real name. But so imagine that right now you have your native application, your hybrid application built with Turbolinks, and you have your web browser, your server, and you're already on a page. You need to communicate back and forth. Maybe you click a native button and you need to pass data to the web view. Or the web view gets a WebSocket notification that's like, oh crap, I need to tell the web view, the native app something right now. How do I do that? Well, we don't have a click handler to bind to because the user's not clicking anything. So what we do is we have this JavaScript bridge. This is how we communicate between the two. When you really take a look at it, all it is we're passing JavaScript messages back and forth. But there's a really nice way that Turbolinks wraps it up for us that we don't have to worry about parsing JSON and making sure everything is wired up correctly. It's just kind of using their API. So the first thing we do is we conform to a WebKit script message handler. That's just saying I can receive messages via JavaScript. That has one method on its that needs to be implemented. Blah, 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 blah. Did receive message. That's the only thing that matters right here, this parameter. It's a WK script message. I get that. Let's present an alert. When someone sends me a JavaScript message, I'm going to present an alert. Here I am parsing out the body of that message as a string. I'm presenting an alert as an alert. I am adding a dismiss button so someone can actually click go away. I am presenting that controller, and that's it. I now have received a JavaScript message from the server, from the browser, or whatever you want to call it. I've parsed out a string from it, and then I've used that string in my native application. Adding an alert is just really easy, but imagine anything that's in there. That's fully encoded JSON from the JavaScript server, or sorry, decoded JSON. That could be a nested hash, an array of hashes. You could pass that into your parser and create objects, persistent to disk, anything at all. It's just built in right there with just a few lines of code by registering your application. So once you have your script message handler, how do I tell Turbolinks to use it, right? It's not just magic that I extend something and and I'm there. We create one. We add it to our WebView configuration. I briefly glanced over this when we created the session earlier. It was like that first line, create a WebView configuration. You just add it in there. That's it. We're good to go. We add it in with the name application. This is what gives JavaScript the hook to start sending us messages. JavaScript now, in our browser, has now exposed endpoints called webkit.messagehandlers.application. And by exposing those methods, they get called into this user content controller method. And they're called into, like that. The top line is just an event listener, for a click listener on something, on anything actually. But what really matters is window or webkit.messagehandlers.application. Remember I just mentioned that? Post message hello. And now we have code running on our JavaScript, on our browser, sending stuff to our native application. This example is very simple on purpose, but it is very powerful, and we use it all the time on BeerMenus. We do authentication with this. We pass in authentication tokens back and forth over the JavaScript. We pass different variables about the screen that need to be rendered natively. When we do app indexing, we pass metadata about a beer page or a place page. We pass it all through JavaScript. It feels weird at first because it's JavaScript and you don't think about it as sending data to a native app, but once you get the hang of it, it's 3-4 lines of code and you're great. The same thing works the other way around, except you just expose the method on JavaScript and you just call it like normal on iOS. WebKit has a message called execute JavaScript. You just write it in there. It's more straightforward actually. So that's the JavaScript bridge. I'm going to move on to more concepts, kind of give an overview of them next. Does anyone have any questions before I move on the bridge or what type of data to pass through? Cool.
Actually, I do have.
Yes.
Is this a secure way to actually pass data around? Can you intercept it, play with a cookie or whatever, authentication cookie, and maybe manipulate with it?
Yeah, so with a iOS app, for sure, you can't actually access that browser unless you expose a way to arbitrarily execute JavaScript, so to speak. So if you were able to, if you exposed something that enabled an end user to write code, write JavaScript, then yes, you would expose that flow. But that is kind of that's the same way for a website, right? It's the same way that a website doesn't just write parameters right to the database. They either strip them, or they permit them, or they exclude them or something. It works the same way. So you do still have to think about that in terms of security. If you were if you were more paranoid, if your app did something more than log beers, you know, if you were saving personal data, if you were a finance app, you probably would not send authentication tokens over JavaScript just to move around it. You would probably have the application natively perform an OAuth request, and then with that OAuth request, write its own cookie directly into without going through the hooks like this. We do a combination of that as well. On first launch, we look in your kind of the hard drive of the iPhone and user defaults and your keychain, and we see if you have a token in there from your last visit. If you do, we use that to authenticate you, but if you don't, we go through this song and dance of getting the token and writing it back down. So, what else can Turbolinks do? We only touched on routing web requests and sending cookies back and forth and showing an alert. We can add a custom user agent. We configure that web view with a custom user agent. This is really nice because now, with your question earlier, did we change our website for Android or iOS? No, because we had a custom user agent for each one of those three. So this is really cool because you can say, okay, this button only show on mobile web, and this button only show on iOS, and you branch it all on the user agent. So you create one helper method somewhere that looks for the user agent, and you say iPhone app ? Or Android app ? And if that's true, you write your custom logic or you write those JavaScript hooks. That's how you identify your different devices now that you have 3, 4 different devices all running on the same platform, so to speak. You can bounce people out to Safari or Chrome. This is really nice, especially for us. A place page, a bar page, has a link to their website. We don't really want to show that in our app. We would rather just send you to Safari. This is more of an iOS thing, I guess, I think, than Android, but we would just want to bounce you to your native browser because we'd rather you have that full experience in your browser than in our app. It's not really relevant. Form submissions are notoriously tricky with Turbolinks. This is definitely one of the few things that are not so easy to do. Think about how websites work. You submit a form, it re-renders that page, you go back sometimes and the form's still filled in, right? That'd be really weird on a native application, right? Like, that's almost like you went back in time on a web application. So you have to handle the form submissions through AJAX, through remote requests. If you're using Ruby on Rails like we are, that is as simple as adding remote true to your form tag. On other platforms, it might require a little more heavy lifting or scaffolding to get that to work. But on Rails, it's handled pretty easily because all this is meant to work together. And I'm not going to touch on authentication because I think we actually just covered it, but there's a whole bunch of things you can do in terms of two-factor OAuth, and it usually involves a combination of native and hybrid web approach so you can get those cookies in the right spot at the right time. Any questions on these or other things that you'd like to know about Turbolinks? Functionality I didn't cover? So, I don't think this is going to happen, unfortunately. My machine, it's a Mac, so it's just not working. But I was just going to show you 3 screens side by side, a web view, an iOS app, and an Android app, and click through them and show how they all worked on the same code base. Pretend that it was amazing, and we'll go from there. But yeah, again, my name is Joe Mazzalotti. Yeah?
What are some bad things about Turbolinks? Like, can you build like fully offline application with it?
I think you'd have to spin up a web server in the app to do that.
Is it really possible?
You can on iOS. It's not like, Apple doesn't give you like a tool to do it. You like write your own code for it.
Yeah.
But because you're making XHR requests, which I think need a real server. I don't think you'd want to do offline apps. I think what you would do is like you build native Chrome that would be able to handle offline stuff, and stuff that would be relevant offline you build natively, and then maybe sync when it got back online. Like you wouldn't build a music player with Turbolinks, because that's going to be used offline all the time.
Yeah.
You build these transactional project management type website built into an app things with Turbolinks, in my opinion. You asked another bad thing with Turbolinks. Forms, like I said, are very difficult. It took us a while to actually get those working correctly. Since we've been working with Turbolinks since it came out, we were like one of the first few people we helped beta test the actual adapters for iOS too. And back then the documentation was a little few and far between, but now it's really good, and there's actually tutorials right on the GitHub page, which are linked in the presentation on like, this is how you handle forms. This is how you handle authentication, or a good way to handle it. And it's really easy just to follow through those if you're curious about more.
Are you a contributor to the Turbolinks repository?
Yes. Yeah, I have contributions on the iOS and Android adapters. Mostly around testing, actually. And the stuff that we worked on, the headers, XHR headers.
And Turbolinks is free?
Yeah. Yeah, it's open source. It's on GitHub. GitHub.com/turbolinks is their like, username, and then they have /turbolinks iOS and Android.
So who actually chose the Turbolinks for the BeerMenus?
That'd be Eric, our CEO.
Oh, and were there some kind of alternatives?
So we're heavily invested in Rails and Ruby on Rails, and it works really well with our small team. And this was kind of the next progression in making everything work well with our hybrid app. Before Turbolinks came around, before Turbolinks iOS, I should say, we had built our entire iOS app hybrid without Turbolinks. And it was a mess. We were essentially creating a new web view every time you click something. So you could consistently break the app in 15 clicks every single time because it ran out of memory. So things like that just like were handled for us perfectly once Turbolinks came around. If you ever get confused and see like Turbolinks Classic versus Turbolinks 5, Turbolinks Classic is what it used to be. It's before all of this. It's what we built our first app on. Turbolinks or Turbolinks V5 is the new one, works with Rails 5. That's the one you definitely want to use.
Does Turbolinks work without Rails?
Yes, it's just JavaScript.
Yeah.
The only thing there's actually a section in the README on like how to get this working without Rails. But you have to, when you redirect to websites, you have to set a special header so the JavaScript can pick up on that and know what to do with it. Otherwise, it would just follow infinitely or something like that.
So I could actually use it with ASP.NET or something?
Yes. Yeah, it's just the adapters as well. It's just JavaScript at the end of the day. The core functionality. Yeah. So, any other questions? Awesome. So yeah, again, my name is Joe Mazzolati. You can reach me at joe@mazzolati.com. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, GitHub, all those at Joe Mazzolati, and my blog is mazzolati.com. Yeah, thank you.